Well, hey friends, and welcome back to the Another Step podcast. If we haven't met already, my name is Kyle, and this is a show all about the habits and routines and disciplines that help people move forward and ultimately be formed into the person they were created to be. So if you haven't already, go back, listen to episodes 1 through 4. They were quite incredible, but today I'm really excited for episode number 5 because I'm joined today by my good friend Alex Mills, all the way from up in Canada, and we're going to get into all of those kinds of things here in a few minutes. And you're going to hear so many different parts of his life. So if you look him up online and you only see one of them, trust me, there is so much more. So without further ado, Alex, welcome to the podcast. It's good to have you.
Thanks, buddy. Thanks for having me. It's I hope we get into it in a few minutes about kind of how our paths have crossed and how we find ourselves in this place today. But I'm thankful that we're here. Thankful that you've started this initiative, this podcast. I think it's really cool. And yeah, just honored to be here.
Well, I am really grateful for the work that you've put in, and we're going to get into so many of the different things, but I think you've already alluded to it. It's really quite incredible, the ways that you have gotten to the place you are now, and kind of how you're connected to the place that I'm standing right now. So for the people who are listening to the show who don't know you at all, will you just give a little bit of your backstory? How did you get to do what you're doing right now? And how are you connected to my neck of the woods?
Oh man, there's a there's a few different paths that convene to even answer that question. But I'm a pastor here in the Niagara region in southern Ontario, up in Canada. I live in Niagara Falls, which I'm just 5 minutes from that wonder of the world, from that big waterfall.
Dude, that's crazy.
Yeah, it really is. But I'm bivocational. I work for a company called Pro Church Tools as well, which is part of how our paths have crossed, Kyle. Yep. But we're pretty far removed from each other geographically here, by about 12 hours, straight shot of a drive. And I know it's 12 hours because I've driven it many times over the last 10 years. I met a girl from South Carolina. You might not know this, but we actually met in Uganda in the middle of Africa.
Okay.
And we met, and by the time it was time to fly home, me back to Canada and Rebecca back to South Carolina, we had decided that we liked each other so much that we were going to start trying the long distance thing. And we knew, we were 18, 19 at the time. We knew even back then that if we were going to try it, we were going to do it. Like we weren't going to try long distance if it wasn't going to be for a lifetime. So fast forward 10 years.
Yes.
We've been married for 7. We have 2 kids, and I have made officially a Canadian out of that Southern girl. She recently passed her Canadian citizenship test. So now she holds both passports, which is pretty cool. That's something she's got on me that I don't have. But yeah, man, so our paths have crossed, and our stories have coalesced kind of in a few different ways. We've got some mutual friends, and we finally got to meet a couple trips ago. I came and visited your church, and now here we are, man. So that's a little bit about me, but we can dig into any one of those bits as deep as you want to go.
Yeah, that's the thing is, like, it's amazing how you just encapsulated 10 years, multiple countries, new citizenship, all of that into a matter of about a minute and a half.
Yeah.
So congratulations for that. So let's go back for just a second. You guys met in Uganda. What in the world were you both doing in Uganda that your paths crossed?
Yeah, well, that first time we were both there for different reasons. So I was 18 and doing what they call a gap year, taking a year off between high school and university. And I had an opportunity. Back then I was a photographer, and I had an opportunity to go to Uganda to, this is the craziest thing, okay? This doesn't even sound real. To document, to take photos and videos of the International Spina Bifida and Hydrocephalus Association. They have an annual conference. Okay. I have a friend who is a representative for that organization. He's in a band. I used to take pictures and videos of his band. So he was going to the conference, and he mentioned to the folks in that organization, he said, "Hey, I've got a friend who could really document this journey and tell the story really well." And they said, "Sure, why not?" So I booked a trip to Uganda to document that conference, but it was only going to be 4 or 5 days. And I said to my parents, I'm young, I'm naive. I said to my parents, I don't want to go to Africa for 4 days. I want to go for like 30. I said, I want to backpack. I just want to travel around with my camera. And somehow, I didn't have a hard time convincing my dad. Somehow I convinced my mom. We convinced my mom. And sure enough, I found myself in Uganda for about a month. And there's a YWAM base in Uganda, a little town called Jinja. That's like 75 acres. It's gorgeous. And I had heard that you can stay there for cheap. So I was traveling around with my backpack and my camera, and I found my way to Jinja. And I was going to stay there for a while because it was, I don't know, it was like $4 a night or something. And I'm sitting there kind of just waiting. I had been talking to the director of the place. And I noticed that, just out of the corner of my eye, that the YWAM, which is Youth with a Mission, for those of you who maybe aren't familiar, the classes had just been released, and I saw this girl, and she's walking out of her class. She's got this long kind of African dress on. She's got this brown curly hair. She's carrying a stack of books, and she caught my eye, and she was actually put in charge of showing me around the base, and her name was Rebecca, and that was the day we met. That was 2011. I found my way back there in 2012 to do my own discipleship training school at YWAM. Okay. And sure enough, that Southern girl was still there. And we got a chance to get to know each other for about 6 months. And like I said earlier, by the time those 6 months were over, we knew that we were really attracted to each other. And and it felt like something that could be for a lifetime. And so we gave it a shot, and we're still trying to figure it out, but I think it's gonna last. Yeah.
Dude, here's the deal. I am always I think about my parents, and they were high school sweethearts. They went to the same church. They lived 5 minutes from each other from the time they were kids. And they've now been married, 30 years, all those things. Some people have stories like that. Other people have stories like you and Rebecca, where you're from different countries, you meet in another country, and it's just like, and I don't think that you can look at that story and possibly imagine it outside of God, outside of him working some things together. And I'm very open to, the ways that God gives us the abilities to make our own decisions. I'm not one of those that's like, God orchestrated your trip to do this thing. However, I'd certainly like to think that maybe he opened a door to make that a reality. And so I love that. So for anybody listening who is like wondering if the long distance thing can work, it can. It certainly is difficult and brings up all kinds of new challenges. But dude, that's such a cool story. So I'm actually not 100% familiar with YWAM. So you were there for like a 6-month discipleship training thing?
Yeah. So YWAM, it's an international organization. I think they have bases in absolutely dozens of countries, but it maybe more than that. And they do a few different things. There's like some Bible like scholarship schools, and I think they have a couple university accredited courses and stuff. But to get into the YWAM universe, the point of entry is always this thing called a DTS, or a discipleship training school, and it's comprised of 2 portions. So the first 3 months is like in class. Every week you have a different theme, and you're learning about God and culture and all of this, that, and the other. And then the last 3 months are a phase where you kind of go out and you live amongst the people, live amongst the community, and practice your faith. And so we did some preaching, wow. We did some taking care of widows and orphans and all that stuff. And
sure.
I had thought about doing a DTS here in Canada in Quebec, which is the French province. Okay. I went to French school, so I thought that might be cool. But I'm really thankful that I chose to do it in Uganda. I just had a cultural experience that I wouldn't have been able to get here. I was marked by those people and that land in a way that I'll carry with me for the rest of my life. But I do want to speak to something really quick, and it's that thing that you mentioned about God and grace and not exactly like orchestrating those circumstances in the way that like a puppeteer pulls the strings of a marionette. Because
Right.
it's my belief that if that's all that this life is, then I don't know, that there's really not a whole lot of thrill to that.
Yes.
But
yes.
but that is not to say that he's not intimately involved with every moment of our lives, and it's so like apropos that this podcast is called Another Step, because I think that's how it works, is that and when I'm counseling people or walking through life with people pastorally, I say this a lot, like, oh, we just need to take the next best step.
That's good.
Like, you can only get anywhere. You know, we talk about following Jesus. I use this phrase a lot, like following the way, and it's like you can only get anywhere by foot by taking one step at a time. You can't take more than one step at a time. And that's how we do anything in life, is one step at a time. And so for me and Rebecca, we can look back now with hindsight and to see in that season of our lives, we were really intently focused on taking the next best step. And that led us to each other. And we've continued to take those steps one at a time, which in my opinion keeps us in the grace of God, keeps us on the path of God that He is lighting up for us so we can see, and has really led us into the season of life we're in now with two boys. We're pastoring together. Rebecca practices as a midwife delivering babies, and I'm working at Pro Church Tools.
Wow.
All of those things happen by being intentional about taking the next best step. I think that's what discipleship looks like. I think that's what following the way of Jesus looks like. And it's easy to look so far ahead to where we want to go, where we want to be, and get anxious about that, and start trying to rush things, and all of a sudden you start fumbling over your own feet. And I think that's really rooted in what Jesus has to say in Matthew 5, 6, and 7, where He's like, okay, tomorrow's going to have enough worries of its own. That much is true. Today, let's stay here, let's stay connected, and let me take care of today. And so for us, that looks like taking one step at a time, not getting too worried about what tomorrow holds or next month or next year, but taking the next best step today. And then you get to look back in hindsight and be like, oh, He's led me along this path this whole way, one step at a time. But we've been kept in the grace of God because we're not getting ahead of ourselves.
Whew. That was good. That's good. Now I can see I see the pastor coming out in you, because that was gold. So if you're listening, go back and just listen to the past 5 minutes, because that was pure gold. I have to say, and I may cut this out, I may leave it in. I was praying on the way to work this morning. I'm the kind of person that I think very much so in the future. I'm always kind of thinking about next year, thinking about planning. Like the past, I can't live there anymore, but I struggle to be in the present. So just your words about even using the name of my own podcast to push, to remind me, hey, it's okay just to take today, to take the step that's in front of you, and not have to feel like you've got to take the step that's 30 steps from now. I really resonate with the image that you gave of fumbling over your feet when you're trying to take the wrong step. Golly, that was good. I'm going to go back and listen to my own podcast this week, everybody. Thank you very, very much. Oh my goodness. So I do want to get into that pastoral piece though, because this is a side of you that if somebody looks you up online, they may or may not see. This is a side of you that I think probably the people who are closest to you see, because you pastor a church and things like that. So I want to get into that. But before we do, like, was your experience at YWAM and the DTS and things like that, is that what got you thinking about ministry and things? Or was that like really the culmination of bringing you to that point?
I don't think I've ever told this story before on the internet.
Ooh.
I actually don't talk about this story very much, because it's pretty tender to me. I think I'll talk about it more as I get older and as I get more clarity on it. But I really haven't talked about the story too much. So my dad is a pastor. He started pastoring in 2000, 2001. So for most of my conscious life, at least, I was born in 93. Right. Most of my conscious life, he's been a pastor of this little local church that his mom, so my grandmother, was part of the group that founded. And the way my dad never went out of his way to be a pastor. He has said this, and so I'm not speaking this for him, but he never even wanted to be a pastor. He came into the pastoral ministry kicking and screaming. And as a child, I never resented his work at all. But I do remember him gently, not being too explicit about it, but gently saying, like, I don't want this for you. And when I was 16, 17, 18, I didn't really have any interest in pastoral ministry at all. I wanted to go to film school. And so I found myself in Uganda, meeting this Southern girl. And one night we were sitting on a picnic table under the stars. And I've been a lot of places in the world. I'm not sure I've seen the stars like I have in that place, and specifically that night. Anyways, we're sitting out there and we're just talking about life, and we started praying for each other. And I didn't know Rebecca very well at this time. She said to me, I'm just hearing this one word. I'm just hearing pastor. And yeah, man, I didn't know what to do with that. Back then, I slowly started to watch my pastoral identity unfold during that time. I preached my first sermon over there. I was really drawn to these kids on the street and just taking care of them the best way I knew how. And they started calling me pastor, like, unprompted. And so that's kind of the first time I ever thought about it. And I got home and really felt like this, for the first time, this desire to serve the local church. And so my service in the local church started looking like cleaning toilets. I was the caretaker of our building for, I don't know how many years, a handful of years. My dad gave me the opportunities to start teaching at church, started leading worship at church. And so over the last 10 years, I've kind of grown up and grown into this pastoral identity for myself. And again, I'll say it again, now looking back in hindsight, whenever someone talks to me about the multiple ways I present in the world, whether it's working at Pro Church Tools or online writing about specialty coffee or my shadow self as a local pastor, whenever I talk about like who I am, if you were to distill it all down and see like the insides of me and like what I am or who I am, well, now I know that I'm a pastor. If I didn't do anything else for the rest of my life, it's who I am, it's what I do, and I've kind of uncovered that in the way that I guess you would uncover like an archaeological site, like just really carefully with little brushes. That's as I think about it now, that's kind of how I envision it, like just slowly and steadily, not in a rush. And now, like, I turned 30 this year, and I stepped away from, I used to own a mobile cafe. I stepped away from that this year, and I'm not very sentimental about things, and I'm definitely not very sentimental about like dates or birthdays. But with those two events coinciding, I really felt like this cosmic call to like grow up and grow into my pastoral identity. I'm kind of shedding off a bit of a kid complex this year. So yeah, man, I've learned over the last half of my life that this is not just what I do, but this is who I am. So if I didn't do anything else, if I never worked another day at Pro Church Tools, or if I never drank another cup of coffee or wrote about coffee on the internet, this is it for me.
Wow. I don't know if it's something about turning 30 or coming up on it, but I turn 30 next July, which even just speaking that into the world feels very, very strange. Yep. But I feel a lot of those similar things about, there's a lot of stuff that I did in, whether you think about it in my 20s or in my younger life or whatever, trying to figure out what was next and who I am and what I do and things. But I do feel this settling, and kind of this gradual uncovering of, oh no, that's who I am. And sometimes I think it's a challenge because other people get in their minds, oh no, you're this and this and this. And then you keep trying to communicate time and time again. No, those were parts of myself that I was trying to figure out if they were going to be the thing. But now I'm realizing actually it's this over here. It doesn't mean that you don't still love Pro Church Tools or specialty coffee or anything like that. I cannot imagine a life without coffee. Right. But you're realizing, this is the thing that I, for lack of a better way to put it, like that I was called to do. And sometimes callings aren't like this initial moment. It is that gradual movement, and then a realization down the road. So thank you for sharing that story, especially one that brings up maybe parts of your experience with God and your family that maybe you hadn't before. So thanks for that authenticity and vulnerability. Yeah, man. So your grandmother was a part of the group that started the church. Your dad's been pastoring it for almost 25 years or so. And now you're on staff there. Now, for a little bit of clarity, what would you say your role, your title, if you have one? What are you doing there now? Obviously, hopefully you're not still cleaning toilets, or maybe you are.
I was cleaning toilets up until the COVID-19 pandemic, and here where we live in Niagara, there were some pretty prohibitive government restrictions for gathering in certain spaces of certain sizes. So other churches were able to open their physical space for worship before we were, because they had more space in the sanctuary for physical distancing. Right. And so I say all that to say, we actually didn't meet in person for 2 years.
Wow.
Yep. And that was not forced. That was that was just we made, that was an intentional decision we made throughout that time. And all of that to say is that time in our lives and the life of our church gave us an opportunity to ask some questions that we just hadn't given ourselves permission to ask before. So prior to COVID-19, I was leading worship every week. I was preaching about every other week, still cleaning the church, doing a bunch of stuff. And it was too much. And I didn't know that until we weren't doing it anymore. And it was like, that was my priorities. My energy was misaligned. I wasn't just prioritized properly. And so all of that to say, that time in our life actually gave us this opportunity to realign and reassess our priorities. And so now we have a rotating team of folks who clean the church, which is awesome. And I'm leading worship every other week. And then on the weeks that I don't lead worship, I'm teaching. And so I just refer to I just say when folks ask, I just say, oh, me and my wife pastor a church with my parents. We don't have senior or associate kind of identities. It's just we're pastoring this place and these people together. We have a leadership team that's involved with making decisions about what we're doing and how we're doing it. And then we have a totally separate elder team that, does all the fun stuff, which is budgets and and all that stuff. And all that to say, our community before COVID was probably 75 to 100, and now we're probably 50 to 75. And so that's what our little local church looks like. And to what you said earlier, if you look up my name online, you're going to find me on YouTube and Twitter and Instagram, and it's going to look a lot like rambling about specialty coffee. You may find our church's website, but our church is intentionally and intently local. We are little and local, and for us, that is okay. That is our that's our identity as a faith community here in Niagara. And so that's a little bit about who we are and what we look like and what my function in that community looks like.
That's awesome. I I've heard you talk on you and Brady's podcast and other places just about your church community. And our church is a couple hundred, 250, something of that nature. But there is something about that, like, just really local. Yeah. We're really family oriented. That is like, it calls out to my soul, and I'm like, ooh, that sounds really peaceful.
Hey, hold on. But before you move on, I just have to say, I've been to your church, and
you have been to my church,
and I can affirm that to be true. Rebecca and I had such a lovely morning at your church. It was kind of a last minute decision, kind of an audible that we pulled. We got a babysitter. And so it was just me and Rebecca, and we felt the love. We felt the familial spirit of your church, and we left your church service both feeling really encouraged about your community and what you guys do there. So I just had to say that before you moved on and started asking me about anything else.
Thank you. Thank you. It was a gift to have you guys with us. I remember that day really, really vividly. It was back in the spring, and I don't remember if it was Sean, our involvement minister, or somebody else walked. It was my dad, and he was like, "Hey, there's this guy here, and he says he's from Canada. Does that ring a bell?" And I'm like, I don't know. I don't, because I had like totally like disregarded the fact that I had sent a message like, "Oh, hey, you should come," or whatever. Yeah. And then I turn around and there are you and Rebecca, and I'm like, wait a minute, they actually came. So then, admittedly, the whole service, I'm just sitting there praying like, please let nothing blow up or something go off the wall. Like, you never know. When it's amazing when you have people who come in from elsewhere, whether it's family or friends or whatever. Now you're just being like, everything's cool, we're good. So anyway, I'm really, really I'm humbled by your words. That's incredibly kind of you, and you are welcome back anytime. Me and Travis were actually talking this morning. I was like, it's the holidays, but they've got a new baby. They're not traveling at all. So we'll see you next spring.
Yeah. Let me tell a quick story about things going wrong at a church service where you don't want them to go wrong. So 5 years ago, my ordination service, I'm being ordained in my church.
Okay.
And there are people from all over there. Our church is like packed like sardines. It's never been like that. Family, friends, people traveled. And I was leading worship that Sunday. And we were opening the service with a song called Rise by House Fires. And I was just so stoked it's like a big song. I was so stoked to just to sing with all those people in the room. And so I cue the pads on my iPad. Our drummer counts us in, and I forgot to put my capo on. And so I started the song in the completely wrong key, and I had to literally stop. Like, we stopped. I put my capo on the second capo, and we restarted. So that was, hey, you know what? You call that an honest mistake or like a cosmic humbling from the man upstairs. I don't know what it was.
There it is.
But yeah, that happened.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. Oh my goodness. That's incredible. Okay. So now I have to know them. So this year, we have a similar structure. We've got ministry staff. There are 4 or 5 of us. And then we have a team of elders, kind of a spiritual authority type of figure, but more pastoral teaching kind of thing. It helps with the business side of things, but that's other people's roles as well. Well, this year we added 4 new shepherds to that elder team. Last year we added 1. That one was my uncle. Okay. This year we added 4, one of which was my dad. So now out of 7 men on an elder board, I'm related to 2 of them. This is our church is very, we talk about this being a family place. The vast majority of my family goes here, at least on my dad's side. Yeah. Grandparents, aunts, uncles, the whole 9 yards. So even in the first, it's been 2 months now. And luckily it's been beautiful and we've loved it. It means we get to have different conversations now. But I'm not naive enough to think that there are not going to be challenges, points of disagreement or whatever. So, I would just love to hear you talk about what's it like to pastor a church with your dad, with your parents. Has that been, I'm assuming that based on what I know about you, that's been, more blessing than anything else, but I would love to hear what's that been like for you. What have you learned from that?
I was on Twitter a couple weeks ago and saw someone post like, hey, if you're looking for a church and you go on a church's website or whatever, and you see that most of the leaders share the same last name, that's a red flag and you should run. And I thought about that for a moment because our church is similar to the way you just described yours. Like there's a lot of Millses at the church, because we're family and we believe in the same God. Sure. And we live in the same place. And
naturally.
Yeah. So I understand the sentiment of the tweet. I think that sentiment is divorced from the reality of local church, which we know because of statistics. Most churches in America are 65 people or less. So are these small little local churches and probably look like the complexion of your church and mine. And so all that to say, there certainly is when you are doing church with family, especially when there are like boards and votes in consideration. There are like some certain safeguards that you need to have in place to keep you from nepotism or whatever it is, and to keep you accountable, to keep things healthy, because sometimes family isn't healthy, So just because it's family doesn't mean that it's like, oh, it's all good. But that being said, there is something so rich and wonderful and beautiful about practicing your faith with your family in the same place at the same time. And so that looks like church. And for us, my dad deserves a lot of credit. He is so deeply pastoral in the way that he cares for people's souls. That just comes out in everything he does, not just in the way that he leads people at church, but in the way that he has led me as a son and now like as a co-pastor. And so he deserves a lot of credit in the way that we have grown in and grown up into this relationship of like a working relationship, if you will, like this partnership. He's still my dad. He'll always be my dad. He'll always have that like fatherly voice and authority in my life, of course. Right. But in our pastoral work, we feel like, just like equals. And I don't know how he pulled that off. Truthfully, Kyle, like I don't know how much of it was intentional. I'm sure it is, but it has also evolved naturally. And when I describe it to people, I just call it grace. I'm like, there just feels like this grace on our relationship and what we're doing. And so we're just trying not to take that for granted. It is surely not a prescription for like what any local church should look like. Some folks just don't have that relationship to do that in a healthy way. But I think we're doing it well. And I think other people would agree, which is probably the most important part. You know, I know our church feels taken care of and feels shepherded and feels led well. And in our community, that all really hinges on my and my dad's ability to be vulnerable, not just with each other, but with our community. And so that looks like having honest and vulnerable conversations from the pulpit, from not pretending that we have everything together when we don't have everything together. And so that measure of honesty and vulnerability, I think, is what really keeps us. It functions as that safeguard and keeps us in a happy and healthy place.
Wow, that is encouraging, knowing that you know, by God's grace, you know, me and my dad and my uncle will get to do this for years to come. So it's a gift to hear that you and your dad have done that well, and really you and Rebecca and your parents. I mean, I love the family leadership that comes in that. It's really quite beautiful. So does that mean that you and your dad, so you say you're either leading worship or teaching, do y'all split that 50-50, or what does that look like for you guys?
Yeah, so we split teaching 50-50 now for the last couple of years. I lead worship, and then we have another girl who leads worship on the off weeks. And yeah, I actually, I should mention one more thing that keeps us honest is when we have the opportunity, being intentional about not centering another person with the last name Mills, but centering another member of the community, because sometimes it's just like easier, right? It's like a task would come up at the church where it's like, oh, Rebecca could do that, right. or maybe even Rebecca is the best person to do that. But we've been learning as we've been going to intentionally call up and call in other people, even if it costs us more work.
Sure,
it's better. It's right to center other people, give other people the opportunity to be seen and to function in their vocation as a member of the body of Christ. So we have been intentional. We have been and will continue to learn to be intentional about that. That's been really helpful for us too.
Oh yeah, I think that's really that's key. Because even if a good chunk of your church community is a Mills or related to one of them, it doesn't mean that the entire church is. Yeah. And there still are a wonderful number of talented, gifted individuals that can offer a unique perspective or a unique offering to those different service places. So I love that you've been able to do that. So what's incredible to me about you and about some of these people who I've gotten to talk to already is the way that you balance multiple aspects of your life. So you mentioned pretty early on that you are bivocational. So you serve as a pastor, but then you also work for Pro Church Tools, which the fact that you say you're teaching every other week, you lead worship on the weeks that you're not teaching, and you have this full-time job. I'm already just like, my mind is imploding. Let's talk for a second. What exactly is your role at Pro Church Tools? And maybe we can get into what you guys are up to there. But then how in the world do you keep all of that balanced on top of having two little ones and a family and everything else?
Okay, well, I'll start by answering that. About a year ago, I realized that I wasn't.
Okay.
So we co-owned a mobile cafe called Groundswell. It is so sweet. It is this coffee trailer. It looks retro, but we got it built brand new. The thing is awesome. Nice. I was so thrilled about the work that we were doing in the Niagara region, bringing in some of the best coffees that Canada has to offer and brewing them up just in the best way we knew how. It was like the work was so fulfilling to me, which was the ruse of it, because it was the type of work that gave me energy. So that made me believe that it wasn't costing me anything. Turns out that it was just too much. And so I alluded to it earlier this year. We stepped away from Groundswell. We gave it back to the hands of our trusted partner, Christy, and she's gone on with it. And she's just, I think she has one more weekend of brewing this year until she closes it up for the winter. And yeah, she's just doing great. But stepping away from that was big for our family, just to earn us back a little bit of margin, to do all the things that you mentioned. So I work at Pro Church Tools, which is, again, from the internet, you wouldn't know that we're Canadian or wouldn't know that we're in the Falls, but we're here. And we do a bunch of stuff. Our company is built on, the cornerstone of our company is free content. And so if you look up Brady Shearer on Instagram or Pro Church Tools on YouTube, or if you go to prochurchtools.com, you're going to notice that it looks like everything we do is free. Like we're giving out free content all the time, high quality free content. We don't hold anything back. We don't hold anything back when it comes to strategy. We just give it all away to help churches tell the story of Jesus. We say this on our podcast every week, that we're going through the biggest communication shift in the last 500 years, thanks to the internet. And so what are churches going to do? Because 500 years ago, when the printing press came around and changed the way we communicate forever, the church was at the forefront of that new technology. the Bible, the first book ever printed, and remains to be the most printed book in the history of mankind. And so the internet has now changed the way we communicate again forever. And so where is the church, and what are we going to do about it? How are we going to use this new means of communication to tell what we estimate to be the greatest story ever told, the story of Jesus? And so that's what we do. All of our strategy and stuff, all of that is free. We give it away. And we're so thrilled to do so. But over the last few years, we've realized, there are a lot of common problems and pain points that churches have. And we feel now, 10 years in as a company, we feel equipped to create solutions to meet those needs, to solve those problems. And so that looks like our software, which is called Nucleus. And so Nucleus is a church website builder. It's a next steps platform. We have a prayer tool in there, online giving. Yeah. And so you can check that all out at nucleus.church, and it's free to sign up and give it a try. And so at Pro Church Tools, I co-host the podcast with Brady. That's a big part of my job. We release that podcast every week on Wednesdays. It's on YouTube as well. But on top of that, I'm the Nucleus general manager. And so I generally manage a whole host of things. And that looks like, doing everything from customer support to collaborating on design and development work. And so working with our team here in the Falls, and then our team, we have another portion of our team in Idaho. And so, kind of just juggling a bunch of balls and trying to keep them all up in the air. But I've said this on our podcast at work, and I say it to a lot of folks when they ask what I do. Like, my work at Pro Church Tools doesn't feel divorced from pastoral work. It feels very pastoral in nature, especially because I get to talk to so many churches on a daily basis who are hidden and not visible and just as faithful as anyone else you think you see on Instagram. And getting to talk to folks who are doing the work is just so encouraging, and that's why when I get up to go to work every morning, it doesn't feel like work. It just feels like ministry, which I think I've tried to weave that thread throughout our entire conversation here. It's like, that's who I am. So going to work at Pro Church Tools just feels like part of my vocation in the world, as being a pastor. And so, we get to work with friends. Like, we're all the best of friends. I'm actually the only one of us here in our office in the Falls who didn't grow up together. All of them grew up together. Oh, wow. And then when they just a couple hours north of here, and then when Brady moved his family and the office here, we had a mutual friend, and he was looking to hire for a Nucleus position, and he said, "Hey, I know this guy. He lives in the Falls. I think you guys would get along." And sure enough, Brady is my best friend now, and just happens to be my boss too. And working with friends is a blast. Similar to pastoring with family, it's not without its own challenges working with friends, and so we name those, we claim them, we call them out, we write them into our values as a company, and that keeps us. It keeps us honest and accountable, and we just love coming to work and doing the work that we do. And so, again, so far it's working. But Brady deserves a lot of credit there too for cultivating that type of atmosphere and putting a ping pong table in our office and filling the snack drawer. It's a lot of fun, and the work we do. I really believe in the work we do. So
you guys, look, I have been a follower of everything Pro Church Tools, Brady Shearer, the whole 9 yards. I think I was in Louisiana still when I originally came across some of y'all's work, so that would have been 2017, something like that. So those are pretty early days, and then moved to North Carolina, spent 4 years there. Definitely, we started diving in. We, put the central hub on the website, all the things. But really, since we moved down here, I'm literally looking at our Nucleus Flows submissions right now that I was literally using before we started recording. It's become a part of what we do. If anybody from my church is listening, it's all the next steps stuff, y'all. Right. Look, we found it's very interesting. Some people are like, this is the greatest thing. And then there are others that can we just have a physical sign up sheet and just not whatever? And I'm like, No, we can't. This is really fun. This is really great. But I say all that to say, what you said about the amount of free content that you guys put into the world, it is incredible. And it's really only like a very small percentage of the stuff that you guys do that is paid, that costs money and things. Anybody, I mean, there's a reason that you guys give away the Next Step Central Hub, prayer, all of those things. They're free. Go put them on your website, and they're incredible. And I'll probably include a link on the description and show notes of this podcast so that if there are any church leaders listening to this, you can check it out for your church too. And the customer support, all of the things is top notch. And I feel like I'm just like trying to be a billboard for everything Nucleus and Pro Church Tools, because it is incredible. But it's built on the backs of people like you and people like Brady, who just believe that the news of Jesus is the best news for the world. And we want everybody to hear it, and we want everybody to come to know that kind of life. And you guys are doing an amazing job of not just creating resources, but like creating beautiful resources. Like the stuff's actually really good. Like sometimes you find stuff online and you're like, do I have to use it? Cause it's just not, but like y'all's stuff is like, it's top notch. You clearly have a gift and an eye for those things. So you talk about working with friends and having a ping pong table in your office, which I'm totally taking notes for that. I'm trying to look around our office and see if there'd even be a place for one. There's not, but we could find it. So it sounds to me like regardless of whether you are going to work at Pro Church Tools or you're walking into a worship service where you're about to teach or lead worship, you have this ability to, you seem at home in those places, and you have found that your identity as a pastor is more informative of what you're doing there than anything else, so that you can walk into those rooms and you don't have to be anybody else. You're like, no, I'm gonna pastor the people that I work with. I'm gonna pastor the churches that I get to interact with on a daily basis, and I see that coming out in you. So just to kind of pick your brain off the top, like what encourages you? Let's go positive. What's encouraging to you about where the church is right now, based on the work that you've done with Pro Church Tools and Nucleus and everything else?
I appreciate you asking that question, because the easier question to ask and the easier question to answer is what's discouraging you. And I think a lot about that, about what I'm discouraged about. And sometimes I find myself talking about it, I think, too much. And so I'm glad to answer the inverse, like what's encouraging to me. I think I've said it in a roundabout way already here in our conversation, and I've really come to learn this and know this through my work at Pro Church Tools. I'll just say it again. Like, we know by statistics that the average church size in America is 65 people.
Right.
And that means that there are countless hidden churches in every corner of every county that are doing their absolute best to faithfully follow the way of Jesus. And thankfully, through my work, I get to talk to a lot of these folks who are only known by their community. And for them, that's enough. And it is easy to get discouraged by a lot of what you see and hear about the capital C church, whether it be in denominations in scandals or denominations in pastoral work at big affluent churches, because those churches are so visible. Those denominations are so visible. And so it's easy to put that in a headline and talk about it and be angry about it. And don't get me wrong, that stuff is worth being angry about. That stuff is worth being discouraged about. But for every one of those stories, Kyle, I'm convinced there are hundreds of faithful stories that are only getting told in this little corner of Lexington County, and that matters. That matters. It matters to the people in your church. It matters to the people in your community. It matters to the creator of the cosmos. Like, it matters. And like, thanks to Instagram and the visibility of social media, like we talk, this is it. The biggest communication shift in the last 500 years. Instagram fools a lot of folks in ministry and outside of ministry to believe that most churches look like the biggest churches on the internet, and they don't.
Wow.
They don't. And the biggest churches on the internet, just because they're the most visible, does not mean that they are the most healthy or the most even viable. That's not what that means.
That's true.
And we've been deceived a little bit to believe that because of how algorithms work. But I'm just so encouraged to know that there are honestly countless churches that are so invisible online, but are so visible in their communities, and that matters. So that encourages me, like, in my work at Pro Church Tools, just as a regular Christian, a follower of Jesus, but it surely encourages me as a pastor, because I pastor one of those churches. I pastor a little church in the corner of Niagara that, I will tell you, we've been in that building since 1991. And that building has been there for a long time. It was an old school called Bethel. There's a lot of history in the building that we meet to worship in that little corner of land. And just in the last handful of years, our very own Niagara megachurch moved from one city into ours and erected this building. It's the size of New Spring in Columbia. They erected a building that size right in our backyard. And so we are in the shadow of this megachurch, and we just continue to faithfully follow Jesus, just like every other little church and every other little corner. And that encourages me.
Wow. That is such a strong word, because I think because of Instagram, because of YouTube, because of the rise of the megachurch, whatever reason, I mean, it's all of those and more. It is so easy for leaders like me and for like you to fall into the trap of feeling like we have to be like the megachurch that just moved next door. Who has thousands of people, a budget 20 times the size of ours, like all of the things. And, oh no, we've got to keep up with them. We've got to compare ourselves to them. So I don't want to miss how important of a word that was to say, like, keep being faithful. I mean, go back to what you talked about earlier about just taking another step in front of you. Like, just keep taking the next step in front of you. Be faithful with the community of people that God has blessed you with, and continue to walk and share life with them. Like, that is so important. I swear, you said earlier, this is like good therapy. This is really good therapy. So thank you.
Well, and Kyle, like, I don't know the complexion of everyone who listens to your podcast. Like, if it's mostly folks who work in church, or surely there are folks who listen who just go to church, but that's not just a word for you and for me, folks who are like curating faith communities. That's a word for folks who just belong to faith communities, because they're seeing the same thing online. They see the visibility, how impressive some of these mega churches are, and they come to a church like yours or mine, and because of what they're conditioned to see online, they're disappointed. It's like, well, they don't have this, that, or the other, and it's an untruth. That's a kind way of saying it's a lie to think that by going to a church that seemingly has it all, that it's a perfect church, because it's not. Every church anywhere is made up of broken people, and so by nature that community will have its cracks and crevices. And so for the folks who are not like you and me, who are not leading churches, who are just going to church and hearing this conversation, or this part of our conversation, the word is the same. And Eugene Peterson, the late Eugene Peterson, would say, when it comes to how to pick a church, he would say, pick one and stay. And so for those of us who belong to a church that maybe doesn't look like the most affluent churches in America, it would be my word to you that just to repeat the wisdom of Eugene Peterson, just to stick around and not fall into the deception that because you see something bigger and better online, that it actually is bigger or better.
Good grief! And
you're really working me up now.
And because I listen to the Pro Church Tools podcast on a weekly basis, which everyone should. I often hear you talk about Eugene Peterson, so I knew it was going to come up at some point. In this conversation. Like, I
really tried not to bring it up.
Hey, it's okay. It's like John Mark Comer trying not to quote Dallas Willard or somebody. I mean, it's just not physically possible. That's right. But I think that's a good thing. I literally there's a little Bible bookstore outlet here about 10 minutes from where I work. And you can get books there for $5, like brand new books. Everything's good. And the past 2 times I've gone in there, I've picked up a new Eugene Peterson book that I didn't have before. I picked up The Contemplative Pastor last week. There was another one that I don't even remember the name, but it was about vocation and things like that. I was like, oh my goodness, I need more of this. Yeah. And the longer I live, the longer I pastor, the longer that I hear stories about Eugene Peterson, like I am so drawn to his life and the reality that he stayed at a place for so long, and was so tempted. Like he had the temptation to go and speak at these huge places, but said, no, like that would be at a cost to my soul. That would be at a cost to my own formation. Like that is just resonating in the back of my mind.
Let me tell you one quick story. I had lunch with a guy a couple weeks ago who was actually a dear friend of Eugene Peterson. And he said to me, we were talking about Eugene, and he said to me, you can be encouraged because every way that Eugene presented himself in the world, like through his books, through his sermons, everything that you think he was or could have been, he was that and more. Wow. And that was so encouraging to me in a world where a lot of the folks that a lot of us have looked up to in the faith have turned out to not exactly be who we thought they were. And I talk about Eugene a lot because I gave this year to Eugene Peterson. When I turned 30 and wanted to grow up into my pastoral identity, I thought to myself, like, I need to be discipled by somebody. And that's not to say I don't have real relationships with living people who are discipling me. I do. But what I wanted, Kyle, was to be discipled by somebody who lived well and finished well. And by all estimations, Eugene did that. He lived well and he finished well. And so I gave this year to only reading Eugene Peterson. He's all I've read this year. And so at the end of the year, to have that conversation with a dear friend of his and to hear that was just so affirming. It's like, thank God that this is actually true, that he is who he says he was and more. And I'll never know now because he's gone and he's with the Lord. But just so encouraging. What a man and a life and a pastoral identity worth emulating for sure. Wow, what a gift! What a gift! We're gonna get to some of our rapid fires in a few minutes, and I think I'm gonna add one because there's what's one book, but now we're gonna ask what's one Eugene Peterson book. So we'll get to that in a few minutes. Okay. So I want to honor your time. We've been recording for about an hour. I don't know where kind of the hard stop line is for you, but I do want to just for a moment before we hit these rapid fires and begin landing the plane. We've talked a lot about pastoral work. We've talked a lot about the church. We've talked a lot about formation and family and everything else. But as we mentioned at the beginning of the episode, like if someone just hops on Instagram and looks up Alexander Mills, they're not going to see any of that. Yeah. They're going to see Alex Mills, the coffee enthusiast. And you talked a little bit about, the coffee truck that you guys had, which sounds incredible. So I just need to know, like, if you can give like a small story really quickly. Has coffee always been something that you'd enjoyed, or did you like come into this kicking and screaming like some of us do? Or like, just tell me about your experience, especially with specialty coffee. Cause some people are like, can I just like make Maxwell House and just make a pot and be good? So tell me about your experience there. Yeah. I mean, I grew up, I come by it honestly. Like I have a brother who's 10 years older than me. So my dad and my brother both drank black coffee. And so my experience to coffee, regardless of what it was Tim Hortons, but regardless, it didn't have cream or sugar in it. So growing up, my palate, my experience with coffee was black. And so I don't know, I probably started drinking black coffee in my late teens. Like not every day, but like if I was going to drink coffee, it was black. And 12 years ago, I had gone on a trip to Cuba and I brought home some Cuban coffee. And then I met up with a friend, actually from the West Coast, and he said, let's do a coffee swap. So he brought some coffee from the West Coast. It was a coffee roasted by this roaster in British Columbia called Bows and Arrows. And this story, for anyone who's in specialty coffee, this story is going to sound so familiar, so reminiscent. Because the coffee he brought and the coffee he swapped for my Cuban coffee was a coffee from Ethiopia that was naturally processed. And this coffee tasted like blueberries. And it just like open, it's like it's the gateway drug for specialty coffee. And I just had my mind, my perspective opened, awakened, enlightened. I was like, oh, coffee can taste like this. So that cup of coffee, I remember where I was, where I drank it. It started me on a journey of like just trying to explore the world of specialty coffee, which there is just like a for those of you listening who don't have any experience with this, like there is a vast world even beyond like the specialty version of coffee that you would get at Starbucks. Like even beyond that, there is there's just such a world. So I would describe it this way. So, you can go to the grocery store and buy like boxed red wine, right? You keep it in the fridge and you drink it with ice cubes. So that's like the lowest level of drinking fermented grape juice. And then you know that you could go to the liquor store and you could buy like a bottle from a Cab Sauv from California where they make 100,000 bottles. So that's like a $20 bottle of wine. That's a step up. That's a Starbucks experience. But beyond that, there are like small independent wineries that you can't buy their wine anywhere else. You can only buy it at the winery. It's fermented with like indigenous yeast, and they make 12 cases. This is what we're talking about. And so this exists not just in wine and coffee, but there's a world of specialty chocolate, specialty tea. There are all these worlds, and I have carved out an internet persona online in the world of specialty coffee. So I have a specialty coffee blog at alexandermills.coffee. And if you just search me on Instagram, you're going to find my mini blogs on Instagram, which I haven't truthfully, you'll notice my activity on Instagram has decreased in step with how my pastoral work has increased this year. I've been really intently like growing in my pastoral identity, and that has looked like me posting a lot less on Instagram, but I'm still active on Instagram, and I ramble about coffee on there, and along the way, 10 years about writing about coffee, I've managed to help a few people here and there, and so that has felt really good to me. I love talking about coffee. I love helping helping people brew better coffee at home. So that's, if you run into me online, that's probably the expression of my identity that you're going to encounter. Oh yeah. Look, I like you. I remember the place that I was at when I first encountered specialty coffee. It was not in Ethiopia. It was, somebody had brought like some actual cold brew that they had made that wasn't like just total trash. Yeah. The guy was a, SCA certified barista, did all this craziness. And he said, you can't go back. Like once you drink this, everything else is going to taste like sludge. And he was right. And I've never been back. You talk about Ethiopia, naturally processed coffees tasting like blueberries. My favorite coffee right now is a natural Ethiopia from Loveland that, what's the first note? Blueberries. It's incredible. And some people are listening to this being like, what? What do you just trust me? It's amazing. Yeah, we may just need to have like an entire episode where we just dive all up into all of the things specialty coffee. But just before we kind of hit the rapid fires, I do want to know, like, let's imagine that there is someone listening who heard your story about bows and arrows and is like, you know what, I kind of want to give this a shot. Or maybe there's somebody that's kind of dabbled and they want to grow a little bit. Maybe they need an at-home setup. Like where would you say these people should start? If they want to like maybe build an at-home brewing system, or like they just need like the very beginning points, where would you lead them to? So if you were to ask me this question 10 years ago, I would have had like a gear list just to recommend and say like, go get these things and start brewing coffee. But now, after having literally thousands of conversations with folks over the years and trying to help them brew better coffee, I've learned that if I were to just recommend like a grinder and a brewing device and some coffee, that doesn't necessarily help because it leaves out the piece of you knowing what a good cup of coffee tastes like.
Yeah.
Right. You can have all the best gear in the world, the best coffee, and if you're not brewing it well, then it's not going to taste good. And so I'll have a recommendation in a moment, but first I would recommend trying to find someone like, surely in 2024, you have a friend who's into specialty coffee and knows how to brew a good cup of coffee. And so like have that person brew you a cup of coffee to basically calibrate your taste for what tastes good and what doesn't. If you can't find that, find a local specialty coffee shop in your area that's going to serve like a black coffee, maybe brew it pour over like they would at Loveland, and use that to calibrate your palate for like, okay, this is what a good cup of coffee tastes like. This is what a coffee that's dialed in tastes like, that finds itself at the intersection of like sweetness and acidity. So like just no bitterness. It's going to be sweet. It's going to be pleasantly acidic, like, I don't know, like orange juice is. So you have to start there. Beyond that, I would recommend getting a good burr grinder. And so, I mean, we're going to get into it now here. I'll try not to get too deep.
Let's go.
But like most cheap coffee grinders you're going to buy at the hardware store are going to be blade grinders, like a little spice grinder.
Yep.
That's no good for grinding coffee. You want a burr grinder, which are these metal things that basically crush the beans. So you can get into a burr grinder for $100 and $150. So the Baratza Encore is where I always recommend folks start. The Fellow Opus is another good one. And so start with a burr grinder. Start with high quality coffee. If you're going to be brewing low quality coffee, you could have the highest quality gear and you're not going to get a high quality product. So buy some locally roasted coffee from a local place. If truthfully, you can use price as an indicator of how quality the coffee is. So if you don't know what a good roaster is or not, if you're paying less than $20 for 340 grams of coffee, like it's probably not the highest quality. So this is a financial investment as well. So you've got the coffee, high quality coffee. You've got a high quality grinder, which is one of the most important pieces. Beyond that, you just need to choose your weapon of choice. So if you want to do like a pour over dripper, I always recommend the Hario V60. You can get the plastic one for like $8. If you're into a little bit more experimentation, I'd recommend the AeroPress. It's also plastic. It's like $30 or $40, and they're indestructible and really good for travel. And then the final piece, which I left to the end on purpose, is a scale. And let me paint the picture for you. You could, if you've made chocolate chip cookies successfully before, you could try making chocolate chip cookies off the top of your head, no recipe, right? A little bit of flour, a little bit of sugar, a little bit of butter. And they might be fine. They might be great. But if I ask you to make the same cookie again tomorrow without a recipe, no measuring cups, you could make it again, a little bit of flour, a little bit more sugar today, a little bit less butter. They're going to be cookies, but they're not going to be the same. And so if you want to have a predictably good and possibly great coffee drinking experience, you need to measure your ingredients in the same way that you measure ingredients when you're baking. And so you need a scale. And you need a scale to measure your coffee, and you need a scale to measure your water. And if this is all sounding like a little bit too much, you can follow me on Instagram, alexander.mills. You can send me a DM. I will walk you through this at any time of the day. I'm happy to do this. And I have like a free brew guide on my website that you can download to follow along. Also, there's YouTube. Like, I've got some YouTube content, but there are lots of people who have much better like coffee content on YouTube than me. And so you're not alone. Like, if you get the grinder and the brewer and the scale, go to YouTube and you'll figure it out along the way.
Dude, I swear, you are a world of knowledge on this stuff. Like, I remember, and I can imagine like somebody listening for the first time just being like, what? What is all of this?
Yeah.
I'm literally looking in my office. I see my Baratza Encore, which is now my office setup. I see my Chemex. I see my my kettle that doesn't work anymore, and it's still sitting there. But don't worry, to anyone listening or viewing, we're going to include links to all of the things that Alex just mentioned, including his social media handles, all of the things, because Alex is quite the Renaissance man, if you can't tell. And he has hit so many different places, So, dude, thank you for sharing all of that. And if for nothing else, let's just hope that somebody starts drinking better coffee.
That's right.
If for nothing else, let's begin to land the plane, because I know you've got sleeping babies at home that you need to go.
I hope he's still sleeping. I've got these headphones on. I can't hear a thing, so I have no idea what's going on.
He's been like banging on the door for the past little bit, just like, let me in.
Yeah.
Okay, so we talked a little bit about Eugene Peterson, and that kind of leads us into this first question. Let's do a twofold here.
Okay.
The initial question is, what is one book that you think everybody should read? And we'll give a follow-up to that as well. What is one Eugene Peterson book that you think everybody should read?
Okay, so with the first one, I'm going out of my way to not give a Eugene Peterson book, so it's perfect the way that this has all happened. The first book I would recommend everyone read is called Sinners in the Hands of a Loving God. It's a book by Pastor Brian Zahnd. He's a pastor out of St. Joseph, Missouri. And it's his take on Jonathan Edwards' famous sermon, Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God. And I'll tell you what, Kyle, like, I've read this book a handful of times because it just, like, it encourages me. It inspires my faith. And I'm so glad. I owe my dad a lot of credit for this. My dad introduced me to Brian Zahnd, but my dad is the father of my faith. And as I was reading this book, for some folks reading this book, it's going to be like ideas and thoughts that maybe you've never thought of. But for me, it wasn't so much of like, oh, I've never thought about this before. It was like, oh, I believe this inside and I know that, but I've never really put language to it entirely.
Yeah.
And so that's what that book did for me. It was just like, oh, Brian helped me say what I have been believing. And that book really marked me.
Brian Zahnd is incredible, and he's totally like he looks like a rock and roll star. Like he's
a
rocking
hippie.
the leather all the time.
Yeah.
Like he's got it going on. But yes, I have, that book is on my shelf somewhere in here. I've actually not read it, so now you've inspired me to go read it. All right, so now, what Eugene Peterson book? Yeah,
I mean, you actually mentioned it. So for pastors listening, I would recommend The Contemplative Pastor. That book is so timely for when it was written, but even more so for now. And somebody like John Mark Comer would agree, right? Like there's a certain rhythm of life that is countercultural to our secular rhythm of life. That is essential for being a healthy Christian, and definitely essential for trying to pastor healthy Christians. So The Contemplative Pastor for sure. And I'll give you a bonus one. It's my favorite book of the year, and it's just called The Pastor, and it's actually Eugene's memoir. And so you get to hear about his experience as a Christian and as a father and as a pastor over the course of a life well lived. So that one's just called The Pastor, and that's my favorite book of the year.
That's Win Collier. Is that who wrote that one?
No, so Win did his biography. And that's right. That's called Burning in My Bones, which is amazing.
That's the one.
Yeah. Yes. But Pastor is the autobiography.
The Pastor is his. Duh.
That's right.
Okay, Kyle. I'm going to have to get that entire list from you, like all the books that you read this year. And we'll get that after we finish recording. Okay. Let's take a little bit of a shift. What is one movie that you think everybody should watch?
A movie called Just Mercy, and it's actually a book as well. I haven't read the book. I noticed my brother was reading it last time I saw him. He had it on his shelf. But the movie Just Mercy. Yep.
All right. What is one quote that you live by?
Okay, here it is. Ready? This is one of the first things I said to my son when he was born a couple weeks ago. I said, "Here's the world. Beautiful and terrible things will happen, but do not be afraid." And so that's Frederick Buechner. And I think about that quote almost on a daily basis, because there are, I mean, to what we were talking about church earlier, like there are two ways to examine the state of the church. One is to be discouraged and one is to be encouraged. And similarly with the world, there are so many terrible things happening, but there are so many beautiful things happening, and both of them are always happening. That much is true.
Yep.
But we don't have to be afraid.
That is so good. So good. Okay. What's your morning routine?
Oh man. So before kids, and even after having our firstborn, but before he was a toddler, my morning routine looked like getting up an hour before the house, brewing a pour over coffee, reading a book, and just having a slow and steady start to the morning. Since our firstborn is a toddler, it kind of just moves at his pace, and so I don't set an alarm anymore. He is my alarm, and so I get up when he gets up, and when he wakes up, he moves a million miles a minute. He is like ready to go, and so we usually start by brewing coffee together, but not a pour over. We brew on the batch brewer. It's called the Ratio 6, and so we brew enough for me and Rebecca. So he helps me do that.
Okay,
that is not efficient. That takes some time. We make mistakes. There's usually coffee on the floor. And so we start there. I usually get him breakfast, and then I get him and me out the door. I take him to daycare, and I go to work. So my morning routine isn't as slow or steady as it used to be or as I would prefer it to be. But that's just the station of life we're in right now. And it's all good.
Yeah, the best thing is that with different seasons of life, you get different routines and different habits and things that fit in. So I love that you're already instilling the love of good coffee into your children. I have pictures of my son Aslan. He's 7 now. He and I would make coffee first thing in the morning. He's like 3 months old, sitting in the bouncing seat or whatever, and I'm just sitting here pouring coffee. So those are the kinds of memories that you hold on to for a really long time.
Okay, hold on. I did not know that your son was named Aslan. So another one of my favorite quotes comes from The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. It's when the kids are talking to Mr. Beaver and they're asking about Aslan, and they say, "Is he safe?" And the Beaver responds and laughs and says, "Is he safe? Of course he's not safe. But he's good." It's like, oh my God.
Yeah. Look, gosh, that one's so good. We've got, this is not a like super meaningful quote at all. But it is from The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. We've got a video of when Aslan first started walking, and there's this line that comes up like Aslan is on the move. And I remember posting that video with that caption, Aslan is on the move.
I think that's my favorite sentence that C.S. Lewis has ever penned. Aslan is on the move.
Oh, it's so good. Good. Okay. If you had to eat one meal every day for the rest of your life, what would it be?
A French omelet.
A French omelet. So what is a French omelet?
French omelet is just butter, a lot of butter, eggs, and salt. The salt is debatable, but salt for sure.
Okay.
And it's a very, very, very soft scramble to the point where so it takes a lot of skill to make a French omelet. And it's a very, very soft scramble. And then it's rolled. It looks like a burrito kind of. And as you cut into the omelet, the center is it's so soft that it's almost like custard texture. So the eggs are barely cooked. That's my favorite thing to eat, and I could eat it forever. So I do intermittent fasting. So I don't eat breakfast. So I start my day I start my eating time at lunchtime, but I don't eat lunch food. I eat breakfast at lunchtime. And so I can't make a French omelet. I've tried. I can't do it, but I can make a really good soft scramble, and I eat that every day for lunch. So
right on.
Yeah, tastes the same, but it doesn't quite have the same mouthfeel and experience. But yeah, French omelet for sure.
Oh, that's so good. You were the first that's not said pizza on this show. So thank you for giving me something else. Yeah. All of the youth pastors that I've been talking to, I eat a lot of pizza, and I'm like, I hate it. I don't want any more pizza. Final one. If you could get in an airplane right now, let's imagine that it's like a supersonic. You can get anywhere in the world in 1 hour. Where would you fly to?
Who am I with?
You can take anyone that you want.
Okay, so I'm not taking my kids. They're at home.
Okay.
And I didn't have to organize childcare. That was organized for me.
Yep, took care of it.
So it's me and Rebecca.
Okay.
So my first instinct is to say Italy. We spent some time on the Amalfi Coast together in 2018, and it was my mom's Italian. I just felt at home there. I love the food. The Amalfi Coast is one of the most beautiful places in the world. So that's my instinct. But I owe Rebecca a trip. I've been to Iceland a handful of times, and Iceland is one of my favorite places in the world, and she's never had the opportunity to come. And we tried to make it work before we had kids, and then we thought about taking Asher when we just had one. And so I owe this one to Rebecca if we had childcare. and we could get on a plane to go anywhere in the world together, I'd have to take her to Iceland.
Dude, that would be awesome.
Yeah.
That would be really great. Seeing the Northern Lights is like on my like bucket list of things. Have you seen like the I guess it's an Airbnb or something that you can stay in. It's like basically a big glass box.
Yeah.
And it's all open glass, and you can sit out there and basically look up at the Northern Lights. Like, that's what I want to do. It looks incredible. Well, dude, I just want to say thank you again. Like, this has been such my prayer for this entire thing, literally as I was praying this morning on the way into work, was that the time that I get to spend recording, whether it's with you or I've got another episode in a couple hours that I'm recording, like that there would be something, it's going to sound selfish, but like that I could learn something, that I could walk away with something. And if by God's grace, somebody else happens to listen and get something too, like that's just icing on the cake. Like that's just even more of a gift. And like truly this conversation with you has been, such a blessing. We've kind of joked it's been like good therapy, but like genuinely, I'm grateful for you. I'm really grateful for the work that you're doing, the faithfulness that you have to the community of people who you get to walk with every single day, the way that you work alongside your friends and your family to share the good news of Jesus with people who are longing for it. I'm so grateful for you. So I want to make sure that anybody who wants to follow along with what you're doing is able. I know we've kind of hinted at ways that they can follow along with you throughout the episode, but if somebody wants to know more, whether it's about Specialty Coffee or otherwise, where can they find you online?
Yeah. So you can find me on Instagram at alexander.mills. Like I said, that's all coffee there, but I'm really active in the DMs there. Like, you ever want to get in touch with me, that's not by email, you can send me a DM there. If you want a little preview into what I believe about like the world and the Lord outside of coffee, you can follow me on Twitter, or X, formerly known as Twitter. I'm Alexander P. Mills on there. I didn't quite get the handle I was looking for. And I'm sure you'll link to like all the Pro Church tools and the Nucleus stuff. And our church is called Life Abundant Niagara. Our website is lifeabundant.info. And I know I've talked a little bit about our church here, and I think our website is like a pretty good reflection of what our little community is like. And so if you want to check that out, it's lifeabundant.info there as well.
Right. Now on y'all's church website, can people find like your teachings or your sermons or anything like that? Do those live online anywhere?
Okay. So we're going to have another podcast about that, because prior to COVID, the answer was yes. And post-COVID, the answer is no. We actually chose to stop posting to our podcast online, and that's a whole nother conversation. So we're going to have another conversation about that. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. I would love that, because it does sound like we've got a lot that we can continue to go into. Yeah. Well, like I said, dude, thank you. We will link up to everything, all of the coffee gear that we've mentioned, all of the books, all of it will be in the description of this video or the show notes if you're listening on audio. But my prayer really for you who are listening to this or watching this is that this has helped you take another step in your journey of life, your journey of faith, wherever you are on that journey, and that you've been blessed by listening to this. So I feel obligated as someone online to ask you if you would share this with someone who you also think would benefit from it, because we live in the world of algorithms and discovery and everything else. Would you consider liking the video or sharing it, or leaving a comment about maybe what your favorite moment was? Because I've been taking notes this entire time with just things that I need to go back and listen to, and subscribe to the channel if that's something that you are interested in, so that you can listen along and be notified about all of the things, as they say over at Pro Church Tools, to click the little church bell. It's not a notification bell. That's right. It's a little church bell. Yeah. So, my friends, I'm so grateful for you. I can't wait to see you in the next one. Alex, I hope you have an amazing day.
Thanks, man. Appreciate you.
Grace and peace, my friends.